So today we're going to discuss 2 Ezra 13, and we'll also get into the concept of the migration of the 10 tribes. Okay, so let's begin with 2 Ezra 13. So we're going to read verses 40 through 45, and then we're going to break it down. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow place of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arszereth. Okay, so now let's break these verses down one at a time. So in verse 40, what we see is that Hosea the king and the 10 tribes were led away captive over the waters and dwelt in another land. So he took them into the land of Assyria. They crossed the waters. Which waters? The Euphrates. If you look at the map, which we will, you'll be able to see that that's the only body of water that they could have crossed. So Salmanassar took them prisoner from Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, across the Euphrates River into the main capital area of Assyria. Okay, let's go to 41. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So now the 10 tribes decided, hey, these heathens are preventing us from practicing our religion, right? Let's read 42. That they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. So they said, hey, let's leave. Let's go somewhere where we can keep the law, statutes, and commandments, because we haven't been able to do that. So let's go somewhere else so that we can do it. So that, remember this, their purpose was to practice the law, statutes, and commandments, which they were not able to do. So then they entered into the Euphrates by a narrow place of the river. So from Assyria back across Euphrates, right? Because when we look at the map, you'll see Euphrates River is the only body of water that they could have crossed. Okay, they went back across the Euphrates River from wherever they were, right? And entered into a land where no man dwelt, right? That was their goal, right? So they entered into the Euphrates River by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. So they walked across the Euphrates River. Now, obviously they didn't need a boat or a ship. Let me state that again. Obviously, they did not need the Lord to hold back the waters if they had a boat or ship, right? They could just sail across. So the fact that the Father held back the waters for them to cross indicates that they walked. Okay, just like in Moses' time when they walked across the Red Sea, right? Same thing. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arszereth. So what we know now is that, hey, they walked back across the Euphrates. They walked a year and a half to get to Arszereth. Okay, so they could only get there by walking a year and a half. So Arszereth was a year and a half away by walking. Now, if you want some real details on this whole story, right? The Watchmen, Deborah and her husband Yehu, they cover this in their 4th video. So you may want to go in there. They do a really good job on that, right? And show you the calculations on how long it would take to get to America versus Africa. Okay. But this is common sense. You can see here, right? Common sense shows you they walked across the Euphrates for a year and a half to get to Arszereth. So if you look at a map, which we will, you'll see you can only get to Africa in that direction. Okay, so during the reign of Tiglath and Shalmaneser V, right, is the time when this event supposedly had occurred. And so you can see right here, right, the Euphrates River, right? So they initially, as we stated, they crossed the Euphrates River to another area, right? And that's more than likely in this Assyrian territory here. Then they counseled among themselves and said, hey, let's go to a land where no man dwelt. So they went and crossed the Euphrates River back. Okay. So from this map, you can see, okay, Assyria, Euphrates River, right? Jerusalem. They were never able to practice their religion in Jerusalem or to follow the law, statutes, and commandments. So they crossed the Euphrates and walked for a year and a half. Now, that year and a half was across desert. It was across hilly and rocky mountains. You're not going to get too far in a year and a half walking. You're going to find somewhere in Africa to stop, right, in a year and a half. You're not going to get through the jungles of Africa as well in a year and a half. You'll make your way somewhere in Africa in a year and a half, right? So common sense tells you that they ended up in Africa, and that Arszereth must be in Africa, and there was many areas in Africa that were not inhabited. So as I said, watch the Watchmen's Whited Out Series 4. They do a great job on this issue. Now, before we move on too far, I want to address some other points that have been made, right? One point was that, hey, Columbus made sure he brought a Hebrew translator because he knew he was going to a land where people spoke Hebrew. Now, my question to you is, did he find anyone speaking Hebrew when he got there? Did he document that the Indians spoke Hebrew? Has anyone documented that the Indians speak Hebrew today? Okay. Oh, well, no, they don't speak Hebrew today. But we did find these stones with Hebrew writing on it. Well, let's learn something about those stones. So one such stone is known as the Back Creek Stone. Okay. Now let's look here, right? In 2014, the Smithsonian Department of Anthropology issued the following statement concerning the stone. While recognizing that a diversity of opinion continues to circulate around the authenticity of the Back Creek Stone, the curators in the Department of Anthropology at the National Museum of Natural History, Smithsonian Institute, believe that the inscriptions on the artifact are forgeries and that the artifact is fake. This opinion is widely shared by other professional archaeologists, as represented in the article by Robert Manford and Mary Quast, The Back Creek Stone Revisited, A Fraud Exposed, American Antiquity 2004. Okay, so it was proven to be a fraud. Here's another one. So if we're going to talk about the Los Lunas stone, another stone that people claim has Hebrew writing on it, let's look here. According to archaeologist Kenneth Fetter, the stone is almost certainly a fake. He points out that the flat face of the stone shows a very sharp, crisp inscription. His main concern, however, is the lack of any archaeological context. He argues that to get to the location of the stone would have required whoever inscribed it to have stopped along the way, encamped, eaten food, broken things, disposed of trash, performed rituals, and so on. And those actions should have left a trail of physical archaeological evidence across the greater American Southwest, discovery of which would undeniably prove the existence of foreigners in New Mexico in antiquity with a demonstrably ancient Hebrew material culture. Once again, proven fake. Okay, so you can't use this as evidence. And I raise this question to you. Let's say these stones were legit. Okay, now you have to prove that you can tie these stones to Indians, right? We have no idea how these stones arrived here. You can't assume they belong to the Indians. They could have came over with the Puritans. They could have come over with, the Egyptians as they visited in ancient past. There are many ways that this could have happened. You can't make those assumptions. But anyway, the experts say that these stones are fake. So this is the Euphrates River, right? You can pretty much swim across that. And so the Lord held back the waters at a narrow path in the river. This is not a narrow path of the river, by the way, but even this you can swim across. Okay. But here are some pictures, right? It's a more narrow path right here. Okay. But let's say you pick the most narrow path in this picture, right? And that'll be either here or up here, right? And the Lord just held back the water so that the 10 tribes could walk across. Well, they walked across from their land of captivity, wherever the king of Assyria led them to, right? They left the land of Assyria, crossed the Euphrates River, walked a year and a half to Arszereth. And if you walk a year and a half, the only place you're going to get in a year and a half will be the land of Africa. So remember, we're told that 2 Ezra indicates that the Hebrews went to Arszereth to practice their ways, something they could not do in their own land, right? They wanted to honor the law, statutes, and commandments, something they weren't able to do. So they went to, let's say, based on some people's teaching, they went to America to practice their religion or their beliefs. Well, the question I raise to you is, what religion does the Indian follow? Do they practice Hebrew traditions? Is it documented that they practice any type of Hebrew traditions? No. Okay. Also, when Columbus arrived, there's nothing saying that he needed that interpreter to speak Hebrew. And to this day, no scientist, no professional historian has indicated that the Indians' language has anything to do with the Hebrew dialect of the Hebrew language. But let's see what the Indians' belief was or is. Native American religion and values. Native Americans in the 19th century were very religious people, but their spiritual beliefs were quite different from those of the new settlers on the Great Plains. Native American religion, the spirits. Although early European settlers in America decided that Native Americans had no religion, the opposite was true. In fact, Native Americans were very religious. Although many Native Americans believed in a great spirit called Wakantanka, their religion was animistic. It was based on the desire to appease the spirits, which they did in a variety of ways. Does that sound like a Hebrew tradition? Not at all. When a young man came of age, he would take part in a ceremony which involved fasting, self-harm, going into a trance, and seeing an animal that was a spirit friend. Does that sound like Hebrews? The only part that it sounds like a Hebrew is fasting. Self-harm and trance is witchcraft, right? One of these ceremonies, the sun dance, featured a structure with a central pole signifying the sun, from which the young men hung themselves by their nipples. Native Americans believed that spirits caused the harsh weather of the plains, as well as illness. They thought that medicine men could speak to these spirits and ask for their help. They performed the Mandan buffalo dance, which they thought would bring buffalo to them. So this is the practices of the Native American Indian. It has nothing in common with the traditions of the Hebrew Israelites. So if the intent was for Columbus to have an interpreter to speak Hebrew to Hebrew people, then why is it not documented that the Indians speak anything equivalent to Hebrew, right? And so one example given was Geronimo, the Apaches, right? So we see here the Western Apache language is a Southern Athabascan language. Southern Athabascan, or Apachean, is a subfamily of Athabascan languages spoken primarily in the southwestern United States, including Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and the Mexican state of Sonora, with 2 outliers in Oklahoma and Texas. You mean they don't speak Hebrew? You mean these guys haven't documented that this is equivalent to Hebrew, a Canaanite language? Why did Columbus need an interpreter? I'm confused. Somebody explain that to me. So we see here that Russia and the United States have been working to build a Bering Strait tunnel for easy access between the 2 nations. But you can see from this picture, okay, the part of the route that you would have to assume the Indians made crossing into what is known as America. Now, all the way from the so-called Middle East, they had to go through Europe, right? And take this long route to avoid the Syrians through the snow, Rocky Mountains, across the Bering Straits. Now, whether the Bering Straits were dried up or not, right? Siberia is known to be one of the coldest places on the planet. And as I said, Negroes do not like cold, right? We don't like that. Not this level of cold for sure. Not from a people that has been raised in the Middle East, in Africa. Why would we even go that route, right? It makes no sense, right? None of this argument can be supported at all with history or with the Bible, right? Because the Indians and Mexicans are not Israelites. Okay, I'm not trying to, cause division amongst our brothers here, but you know us at Teotw, we are all about accuracy. We are all about truth. And so if you can prove it, prove it. If you can make the case, make the case, right? And hey, I'll come back and say, hey, brother, you right, blah, 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 right? But this is false and incorrect. And I mean, common sense tells you that a Mexican and a Native American have no Negro blood. So if your wife came home one day, your Negro wife came home one day with a baby that looked like a Mexican and told you that's your son because you are a Negro, would you believe it? Okay, well, no, they made it with the Chinese and all these other races on their way through the Bering Straits and all of this stuff. And yet they entered into the land, and once they got there, they lost their heritage, even though they went there to practice their religion, to practice the keeping of the law, statutes, and commandments. They ended up worshiping animals and spirits. Let's have some common sense. Okay. Peace and blessings, Israel.